Okay, so we're going to start with here now with roof to wall attachments. Now, one of the first things I would say is there's lots of changes. Uh, you know, on the onset, you look at it and you go, well, there's not too much there, but there's plenty of changes, and we'll get into those. We'll dive into them. We'll go through some examples. So, first off, I'm going to repeat this, and I've said it before. Read the form. You know, so many times we talk about doing this and nobody actually reads the form. And a lot of times when people ask questions, I'm like, well, did you see what it said right here? And that answers most of your questions. And I wish it was a 100% the way it was, but it'll answer most of your questions and help you keep you out of trouble. So read the form. Well, one thing you'll notice is that they've made some significant changes here, and we'll go through them a little bit at a time, but they still have the toenails, the clips, the single wraps, the double wrap, structural, other, unknown, no attic access, connections not installed as intended is new, I. So you'll also notice under some of them that they also have an uplift, and some of them will say that there's a purpose-made metal connector or fastener must be installed per manufacturer's installation instructions. So that we were paramount in putting that together and making sure that was correct for retrofits. So we'll go into that, but we're looking for the weakest. Obviously, we're not including hips or valleys, that kind of stuff within 5 feet of the inside or outside corner, and we're determining the weakness. So let's get into this. One of the things that I'm real happy about is this was an argument among instructors on the last form, and the old form, it said the metal connectors that had to wrap over the top of the truss or rafter, and they meant over the top of any portion, not the top cord. And I always said this, and some people believe me, some people didn't. They said, well, it's the definition of the word. And when I brought it up in one of the meetings, they said, no, that's not. We meant just over any portion of, so just wrapped the truss or rafter. So even the bottom cord was fine, or a web member was fine, as long as it wrapped over it. Now, the interesting thing about that is, if you understand trusses, especially if the gusset plate gives, all bets are off anyway, and those barely ever fail, and especially in a wind event, a lot of times the truss will fall down and then it might break, but the gusset plate usually doesn't fail like that. So, but what are our roof to wall connections? We have toenails, clips, wraps, double wraps, structural, other. We also now have this unknown and I, and we'll get into that. We want to check 3 trusses or rafters in a row. We want to check 3 walls and all access areas, meaning all floors. So if you have an attic and a garage, you want to go in there and check 3 walls. And then if you have a second floor, you want to go check 3 walls. And the reason for it is in different portions of the house, they may use different connectors. And we want to make sure we get the weakest. Again, we want to check 5 feet from all corners. And that's to prevent, where we have a higher uplift requirements and lower uplift requirements in corners. And not going to go down that path right today, but we want to make sure we're skipping those. So, again, 3 connections. This is how I document 3 connections. Obviously, these are not good enough to show what they are because you can't see the nails and that kind of stuff, but it does show that they're on every truss. This is especially important on older homes because a lot of times they went to every other truss or rafter. So this is why we check 3 in a row. Again, like roof deck attachment, we want to make sure we get all of them. So one thing I want to say here is make sure, a lot of times you need to check the other side. A lot of times inspectors forget that they can put them on either side and it would work. So we're going to check for 3 or more nails for the roof to wall attachment. We want them free of severe corrosion, and we want to make sure they're not every other truss or rafter. That is pretty common in older homes. Again, 5 feet from the corner. So this is where we're doing 5 feet from the inside and outside corners. Just a little graphic to show you it. And because the uplift requirements may change in those areas. So, a lot of times we'll see people, they find a double truss or, a king truss, and they go, oh, it's a double wrap. And that's just that one spot. So, severe corrosion. This is a clip with a head severe corrosion. It's flaky. It's cracked probably there, falling apart. And they did a retrofit. And we want to make sure we don't have severe corrosion in this, like this. Darkening, a little bit of rust, surface rust, not a big deal, but severe corrosion. So we also want to make sure we have 2 nails, or 3 nails, not just 2 like shown here. if we can see the wall connection, it also must have 3 nails. So just keep that in mind. This was an open garage. We took it in and it had 2 and 2. Even if it had 3 in the rafter, you still only have 2 in the wall, and that would be your weakest connection. It would not be a clip. So I just want to keep that in mind. We're only responsible for just looking at the wall connection if we can see it. Most of the time we cannot. So but keep that in mind. So toenails. So obviously this has changed a little bit, but let's get into it here. So we can have a nail driven at an angle. So that would be the top box. Metal connectors that are not installed as intended and do not meet the minimum conditions or requirements. We're going to come back to that. You know, I had some discussion with some people. I want you to remember is F is other. Don't be afraid to use F. Don't just say, well, it's weak, I'm going to go, it's this, it's that. We still have to meet the uplift requirements of 185 pounds. Now, where you go with that, depending on what the connection is, you know, I can't give you too many scenarios, but if you're not sure, go to other. And then you can have an other connection. That method documented provides substantial wind allowable uplift capacity of 185 pounds or greater. So I've been saying this a long time for about the Simpson strong drive screw, you know, the structural screws. They're not a metal connector in the sense that you need 3 nails, but they do provide the same amount of uplift. We're going to get into that a little bit and why some of the catalogs and websites might become your best friend here shortly. That's why I said there's a lot of updates here. So there's our options for toenails. Now, again, you know, reading the form makes a big difference, and we need the metal connectors to be installed as intended. And we're going to go back to this, but if they're not installed as intended on a retrofit, you can't use them. So we'll come back to that. So minimum conditions to get B, C, or D. This is expanded a little bit from the prior form. And again, we have our 3 nails. We're no more than a 1/2 inch gap without blocking. We can have blocking up to 1.5 inches. So we'll show you some examples of that. Free of severe corrosion. And now we're looking at single straps that wrap over generally, or don't wrap as far as clip goes. But we're also looking, if it's a purpose-made connector that's, again, on a retrofit, we want to make sure it's installed per manufacturer's installation instructions. So all purpose-made connectors need to be installed that way. You can't alter them. So that was a big problem on retrofits. They met the definition on the form, but they didn't meet the uplift requirements because they were altered or they weren't designed for that. I'll give you a perfect example. Using a flat strap that's considered like on a wood frame house, you do wall to floor to wall. They would just bend that around or twist that, and that's not acceptable. Yeah, same thing with like plumber strapping, not acceptable. So minimum conditions to qualify. Note all retrofit connectors and structural fasteners must meet option 3. So this is kind of where I'm going with this. We got our blocking and our gaps, severe corrosion, and then metal connectors of single straps that wrap over the truss are secured to the wall or top or bottom plate with a minimum of 3 nails on each side and free. Again, the wall, if it's visible, we have to report it. Purpose-made connectors, structural fasteners must be installed per manufacturer's instructions. So retrofit connectors have to meet 3. They can't just do whatever they want. And this was a big thing that came up because we had a lot of roofers doing retrofits that were doing them incorrectly. We got the law changed, so now they can do retrofits and when they're doing a roof, which is great because it gets the job done. But we want to make sure they're doing it right, so we want to make sure they're trained right and they work properly. So, clips. So we talk about this metal connectors. Again, this has not changed much except this purpose-made metal connector, and they have to have 386 pounds or greater per manufacturer's installation specification, and requires site-specific documentation. What does that mean? Well, we might ask for company cam photos from the roofer that installed them that shows them. We might ask for a bill of sale of buying the connectors and the fasteners they used. We might get some information from the building official if they got a permit. So not all everybody's going to require permits, and I think some of this is going to play out where you might wind up seeing more of them down the road. But that's the kind of documentation we need. We need to prove that that's what they did. And if they bought 20 of them and you know they needed more, well, that doesn't count. So single wraps. Okay. So again, we got same thing. We can have the same kind of gaps and stuff with single wraps. We can block them. Nothing really has changed here except for the 1 nail thing. So metal connectors consisting of single wraps over the truss that are secured with a minimum of 2 nails on one side and 1 nail on the opposing side. It doesn't matter which side those nails are on anymore. So some people that were getting clip credit for the 3 nails but couldn't get the wrap credit because it wasn't 2 and 1, now it can be 1 and 2, they can now get the single wrap credit. So that's, I think, a plus. It was the fact that nobody tested it, so nobody really knew what it would do, and I think some of the manufacturers tested them and said, yeah, it kind of works, so they're fine with it. And again, we're looking for 535 pounds on retrofits, and we want to make sure they're installed per manufacturer's installation instructions. And we are, again, requiring site-specific documentation, whatever that's going to look like. And, company cam photos a lot of times will have not only the pictures, they'll have a time date stamp, they'll have an address, they'll have a GPS location. So those are great, and a lot of roofing companies use those for underlayment because obviously they don't want to leave a roof open waiting for the dry-in inspection. So we do accept those if the documentation looks right. Now I'm going to warn you is roofers sometimes will send you the wrong pictures, or purposely, maybe not purposely. So just make sure you're verifying that the matches. Is it the same type of truss? Is it the same type of decking? Do the trees in the background match? Does the roof shape match? Things like that. So you might have to do some investigations on that. Double wraps. Okay. 2 straps, 1 on either side of the truss or rafter. This comes up quite often still. They have to be opposing, meaning they have to wrap from one side to the other. And a lot of people see 2 on one side, and somebody posted a picture on Facebook the other day, and they're like, well, thanks, John, for teaching me this. I didn't realize it. But most of the time when you see a 2 on one side, that is going to be not the whole house. So that is usually a king truss or a corner or something like that, and double truss that they need extra uplift on. So, but we need a minimum of 2 nails on one side and 1 on the opposite side. Again, just like before on the single wrap, the nailing pattern is changed. So that's a great thing. Again, another little change. We can have a metal connector consisting of a single wrap that wraps over the truss that's secured to the side of the wall or bottom of the top plate with a minimum of 3 nails, meaning it doesn't really have to be nailed to the truss or rafter, and we'll get into that here in a minute. We'll show you some examples. So, again, they have to be purpose-made connectors. There's one that doesn't wrap at all. It's the Simpson Strong Tie, and I'll show you this. It's the MTA and the MTA M, and this is a great one. They're a little on the pricey side, but they're great for retrofits because they can be done from the top without having access to the wall. You just need access to the top plate. So love those. Wonderful way of doing it. They're starting to use screws too. So they may not give you double, but there's different installs for screws, and we'll go in that and why you may need to look them up and see what they did and how they did it, what the uplift is. So hopefully those that are doing retrofits are providing that information and like how many they installed and how they did it, either with the permit or to the homeowner so they can get the credits and have all that documentation kept in one place. So, all right. Structural anchor bolts, structurally connected. This hasn't changed, or a concrete roof deck. So this is pretty common on a concrete roof deck. We have a lot of times a concrete wall, concrete roof deck. We call that structural. You can have like a Frank Lloyd Wright kind of house that's bolted together. That might be the same kind of thing. Like I-beams, that kind of stuff. Again, don't be afraid to use other. If you don't know, put it down other. Again, the OIR is tracking this information, and I think everybody would say, I'd rather see other than you get it wrong. So if it's unknown or unidentified, meaning you can't see it, then it's G. There's no attic access. Mark it as no attic access. We know it's unknown, you can't see it, but mark it as no attic access. And I, connections not installed as intended. This is specifically for those retrofits that they botched. And that's what that's for, okay? So we'll go through some examples. How do we know what the uplift is? We can go to the manufacturers. Here's a few of them, and you can look up their catalogs, and Simpson Strong Tie has been out quite a bit teaching some of this stuff, and they do have a high wind catalog, which is great. Get yourself a copy of it, download the PDF. Other manufacturers have their own catalogs too, and there's a few out there. So we look at the catalog, and this is what you see, and you say, wow, John, there's a whole lot of information here. Well, once you learn to read it, they do have directions in the book, so you might want to flip through this before April 1st if you can, and understand what they're talking about. But one thing I want to talk about here is you want to make sure you're looking in the right places. You want to make sure we're using the right kind of wood. Southern pine is typically your trusses, that kind of stuff. And so you'll make sure you're looking in the right column. And then, of course, we want to make sure that we're matching the numbers of the connector. So that's the model number on the left. And those on a lot of the newer connectors are very easy to see. There's either a sticker, an engravement. You're going to need something to get down there and read them, or you're going to need documentation. And then you want to verify your documentation matches what you're seeing. So, but also I want to report here is sometimes to get the uplift, you need 2 of those. So just remember that our typical H-clip, the H2A and the H3, that's a typical hurricane clip that we look at all the time. To get a better uplift, you can put 2. So they can add another one on the opposite side. That would work just fine. So just make sure we're checking and make sure those columns, we're looking at all that information and reading all the notes on them, because a lot of these will tell you what fasteners have to be used and how they have to be installed. So again, we have some that are for embedded, meaning these are embedded in masonry. You're not really going to retrofit the embedded ones, but this is the chart. And then you can have post-installed ones. So we can have for masonry. So we're going to use that. This one is a Simpson. I happen to use their catalog because it's very nice to work with. And they're using Titan turbo screws most of the time here. And again, you can read the numbers right on them. And a lot of times if you get down there all the way to the wall, you'll be able to read them. And then you can, of course, look at the uplift. Here are some examples of what I'm talking about here. And then you can look at these different connectors. You can have the MTSM. They make it different sizes so that the number at the end is the length. But you can you could wrap that over. That's perfectly acceptable. The LGT, pretty common one. Again, you have to look at the uplift to see if it's now a clip or is it a wrap, because you could go by the uplift and if it's a retrofit. The H16 we call that a double wrap because it wraps over both sides, but it may not be connected to the truss at all, meaning there's no nails in it. You'd have to look at the instructions on the current one they're installing, but a lot of times we see that it's not really going to go anywhere. It's going to, because the strap is attached to the wall on both sides, that stops the truss or rafter from moving, and which gives it that uplift, which is fine. So this is the HGA and the HGA-M. Couple things I'd like to point out. They do come in a kit with nails or screws. The HGA is for wood to wood, and the HGA-M, M stands for masonry, is for wood to masonry, so trusses to masonry top. Make sure they're using the right way, using the right ones, making sure they're using the right direction. Now, the masonry one's a little longer on the bottom side because those masonry screws have to be separated a little bit so they don't crack the concrete. So those are great for attaching from the top. And by the time you're watching this is probably, the documentation should be out for this to be a double wrap. So, but you want to read what they are, make sure they use the right screws, right nails, and make sure they're installed properly. Again, the gaps are important. So this is another one, the NVRTR. I'm not a huge fan of it, but this one comes as a kit. I'll show you a picture of it. And it looks like this. Their documentation is simplistic at best, but this is it right here. And one of the things you're going to have to look at is the number of nails in it, because they do require, I believe, almost every hole to be filled. So it's like 8 or 9, something like that, nails in it. And this is what it comes with. And you can see how many holes in it. It does come with a block of wood, so that wood is used also. And it's bolted right down to the masonry. And it has we'll call it a masonry anchor. So people call them redheads as a brand name, but it's an anchor. You have to drill a hole and put that in. So that will look like that when it's done. And that block of wood goes on the bottom. So see that a lot in South Florida. So again, this is our roof to wall attachments. And again, we're going to mark the weakest. So the weakest being A, the strongest being E, D or E, depending. And then, of course, don't forget that we're going to mark other. When we're not sure, write it in when it is. Unknown, unidentified, don't forget that. We can mark that. No attic access when there's no access. And connections not installed as intended for specifically for retrofits. Meaning, what if they altered the strap or something like that? And we'll go through some pictures of that here in a second. So I think I start with the basics. I've been using this picture for, I don't know how long, but this is for somebody, new inspectors, with Toenail. On the frame wall, you can see it's wood. We got a roof truss. We got a roof deck. Okay. This is, again, an example of toenails. This is a stick built, and we'll have a toenail on this. People ask a lot of times, what about, John, what about if they put the connector on the ceiling rafter and not the roof rafter? Now, the manufacturer will tell you it really needs to go to the roof rafter, but most of the time there's going to be one unit, just like your gusset plates are going to be nailed together. So, and then a lot of times your nails are long enough that they'll go from one side through the ceiling rafter into the roof rafter, and again, that would be allowed to be blocked. You could consider that blocking. So most time if they put them on one side or the other, I'm good with that. So again, here's toenailed from the opposite side and through the roofing rafter, and then of course we have our clips. These are what we're going to look at for clips. And here we are, hurricane clips. We got a roof truss there, a roof deck, and you can see our frame wall. And these are typical clips, that they H-type clips. These are H2s or 2.5s or 3s. And then we have these other metal connectors. I showed you pictures of these earlier. This is a clip, but if you knew the manufacturer and you knew the number on it, you might have a better than clip credit. You might be able to go to a single wrap credit, depending upon the uplift. So you have to look carefully. This is a typical, we call it a diamond clip. It has 3 nails on each side. This is one piece of metal. Again, showed you a picture earlier. I'll show you again. Here's your typical H clip. This metal strap. Now, this was always labeled as a clip. You know, we always thought, oh, this is a strange way to do this. It's a metal strap. It's got, 16 nails in it. The uplift is probably something else other than clip. But the old form, this was always a clip. Now, if we knew what the strap was, we might be able to give it something else. Again, don't forget, if we see the wall connection, we have to mark what we see if it's too weak. I'd like to point out here, I have examples I show you in class, but this one shows you a rivet. This is the saddle for the truss or rafter. That is not a nail. That is a rivet. This one only has 2 nails. So a lot of people get this wrong because they assume that's a nail, and it's not. If you look carefully, you see one's rounded, one's flat, more like a nail in the left picture. So be careful when you're looking at that. And rivet sometimes is made out of plastic too, by the way. Again, we want to make sure that we're every truss or rafter, we're going to look for that severe corrosion. So here's a single wrap. This is a typical single wrap. We take pictures from both sides to document it, make sure we have the correct number of nails. This is a pretty good install. And this, again, is a single wrap. Doesn't go over the top cord. It doesn't have to be. So this is probably an intermediate bearing point. It might be by a patio or something like that. Don't know what would be on the outside, but again, based on the insulation. Double wraps. What are double wraps? This is what double wraps look like. One strap from each side, wrapped over, nailed properly, at least 3 nails. Most of the time when somebody does a double wrap, you're going to see plenty of nails. They went a little, they were really thinking about it when they built it, so they went to double wraps. And so they're going to fill all those nail holes. That's the requirement nowadays. I don't know any manufacturer doesn't require you to fill every hole. So this is a Sanibel type, and we always say this is not what I showed you earlier, but it's a similar type by a different manufacturer. And you'll see it has 2 nails on each side, but this is a double wrap because it wraps over and it's attached to the wall. So here's the other one I showed you earlier. This is an install again on an open ceiling, so you can kind of see what they do with it. And you can see why if there's no nails in the truss, it's not going to make much of a difference. That is not going anywhere. And bending them underneath the top plates like that is actually a great way to install those. So is this a double wrap? No. There's 2 straps coming up out of the concrete from one side. This is not a double wrap. So just keep that in mind when you're looking. You got to make sure you're seeing, see the whole thing. And they need to be on either side for double wraps for that. Again, here's the Simpson one, and this is what it looks like. You can use it as a retrofit if you wanted to. You have to really get in there, but sometimes they'll put them in if layout was wrong when they went to the masonry roof. Sometimes they'll add them like this on frame, but here's how they work. And on these, you gotta be careful. I mean, there's different types of holes in these. Some are for nails, some are for screws, and you really have to know what manufacturer required. Simpson generally round holes or nails. I think it's octagon or hexagon holes or screws. So, and occasionally they put extra holes in them, and I kind of joke at them because sometimes they put these extra holes in, and you're like, what do I do with this? And Simpson, of course, they're trying to get away from that. So that was something they did years ago. But here's the Sanibel type, and then you can kind of look up the uplift, and this has been in my presentation for years, and it's the HDPT2, and so the HD2X, and this is what they do with them, and sometimes they spread them out a little bit, which is, fine. It's not going anywhere. So, but there's your uplift chart. You can look at it. This is the USP manufacturer. There's one not Simpson, but they're very similar. Talk about other connectors. The Simpson strong drive screw. So this is what it looks like. I think it's about 6 inches long. The only thing you'll see with this is if you can, is the head. There'll be a little hole, and you might see this color head. This Simpson uses this color. There's another manufacturer who uses black, but this is how it's installed. This was the original install. Excuse me. And they did this on new construction. They still use it. It's a great product. I like it. One of the things I really like about it is it's not prone to corrosion like other connectors are because it's not exposed. But I want to point out that there are now other installations available, other ways of doing this. So just because you think it's wrong, you're going to have to go look them up if it's not what you're used to. But this one here, they did use 2. Again, the uplift would change. They do make a little jig to make sure they get the angle right. If you look at the top row, the second picture in from the left, the angle has to be a certain way, and then of course the next one they show you go straight up. So it can change the uplift on how they do this. So they're constantly innovating and making this better, and other manufacturers are following suit. So again, fan of the product, efficiency, and you look in the second row, first one on the left, you'll actually see a jig on the angle, so they get the angle right. Anyway, again, they're working on different ways of doing this. They're even working on ones where you can go straight down from the top. So here's a video of a guy does it, and I won't play the video here. It's very difficult to hear, but he says, I'm not sure if I got that or not. So this is why going from the top is, blind screwing is always tough, and so I'm imagining Simpson will come out with some way to line it up. The other thing I worry about is obviously the plywood, what you're going to do that, what you might do to the truss or rafter. But as far as a retrofit, if you were retrofitting, how wonderful would it be able just to line them up and just go to town and run along and put those in on a retrofit to hold it together. There's a little more that has to go into that. You have to know how far you can go. You have to know what the truss looks like underneath. So it's not quite as simple, but these screws, some of these are a foot long. Wonderful way of doing it. They're like a lot of times they call them timber screws, and they're for putting large timbers together, and they're finding ways that this will help strengthen hoops. So again, they have the HJ and the HJM, and I'll show you those here. These, again, you want to make sure they follow the instructions. You make sure they put them up the right way. Simpson really will not support them, especially on masonry, being put upside down. So the angles and the way it's designed really needs to be installed the proper way. Wording goes up to the top. So this one is by a long-term inspector, Brian Hoagland. He's now retired. He worked for me for many years. He was an inspector long before I was. Became a great friend, a great team member of our company. He kept his company alive even when he joined us, and he found this on a wind mitigation inspection. You get no credit for this. I will give you props for it. I'm assuming this person had stock in a chain company or something, but definitely one way of tying things together. There are other systems in place now with cables and things like that. You might start seeing those more and more. And great systems, but you're going to need to look it up or have them find out what the uplift is on those. So a lot of times you'll be on a newer building, and you might be able to get it from the plans. So we talk about bad installs. You see this one on the bottom left. It's too far from the truss, meaning there's a gap. It's loose, not enough nails. Again, these are some older pictures, but they still provide the same kind of stuff. This one looks great. We got this a retrofit because they missed them probably in the install. You got 2 nails on this side. You go the next one next to it only had 1 nail. So now this doesn't make much of a difference now, but the old one, you go, oh, you're going to lose your credit. And then when you look to the other side, you go, oh, I got plenty of nails, but I lost my wrap credit. Well, that's no longer the case. We still get our wrap credit here. So this one was sent to me by Jason Rand. Again, old house. One thing I want to point out is there's plenty of nails there. It does not have one on each side, so getting the wrap credit's not going to happen. It's twisted. We wouldn't do that today, but this strap is a thicker strap than what we would use today most of the time. So just keep that in mind. That's one reason why these older ones, even look at the nails, they use the size of them. There's also a gap here on the bottom left, so you'd have to measure that. Again, this was sent to me, so I didn't get a measurement, but we're not allowed to twist straps anymore like this. If they're not designed to do that, you're not supposed to do that on a retrofit. So here we are, again, a thicker metal strap. It only has one nail. You cannot alter a strap at all. And so, like you couldn't just punch another hole in there and put another nail in it. Now, would we know if they did that or not? We probably couldn't tell if they lined it up in the middle, but you cannot alter straps, and we'll see some of what people have done, and it can't be done. When I teach with Simpson, they show you people took a twist strap and straighten it out. You can't do that. Simpson only allows straps to be bent, many straps to be bent one direction one time, and that flat straps remain flat, but certain straps are allowed to wrap over your truss and they're allowed to bend them one time. You're not allowed to bend them back and move them back. It fatigues the metal. But here, this one's too far from the truss. Remember, we're only allowed that half-inch gap, and then we have to block it. But this is how I document it. We're allowed to block it up to 1.5 inches. These are way too far to block, so they need some kind of retrofit. And again, too far, and you see we stick the ruler down there. That's one reason why I like carpenter's ruler. Not a perfect picture, but gets the point across. It's definitely more than a 1/2 inch. So again, this one's, this happened a lot of times, right before Andrew. We started building, homes, and this happened a lot. So that time frame, just the early 90s, late 80s, it was pretty common stuff like this would happen. So again, doing this after a while, you know what you're getting into before you get there. This is a flat strap that they screwed down to the top. It's not the greatest picture of all, but it does work. And it sounds like it would work, but the problem is it's like a zipper effect. It pulls up one screw or one nail, and the next one, then the next one, so you don't get that uplift. It's just not there. Simpson did a great job studying this. They have a great little video. I don't know if it's public or not, but in one of their presentations, and it shows you how it fails at very minimal lifting. So here's an interesting block. So this is how you block it. I prefer the blocking go all the way to the roof deck, but this is acceptable. It took away the slack in it. Again, there's lots of things we can do with this, and as we go through it, you see a lot of different pictures. I can show you hundreds more of those not done right, but they need to be installed properly. So, structural bolts, what does that look like? So, you get a lot of condos, and I kind of touched on this earlier, but this is kind of how I document concrete roof deck. And I understand that you can have a concrete stairwell and not a concrete roof deck. So if you're going to do this, document it. You want to make sure that the concrete roof deck is really concrete, not just a truss system with a concrete stairwell. But this is a better way of documenting it. You go through the hatch, and obviously there's the concrete. So we know we have a concrete roof deck. This is an example of some structural bolts. Again, this is a 1970s something house. Just something where I came across. Smoke damage is interesting, but nonetheless, it's definitely bolted together. I don't know who came up with this design. I'm hoping they owned a bolt manufacturing company or something, but it's going to hold together. So, what can a homeowner do? These are retrofits. Again, this little example of making sure we're getting the right number of facets, but going through the soffits is a great way to doing it if you can. The roof is even wonderful too if you can get the roofer to do it. Before, when you couldn't get the roofer to do it, the roofer wasn't going to wait on a GC, RC, or BC to show up and do it while he had his roof torn up, so it didn't happen. So that's one reason why we wanted roofers to be able to do it, so they weren't holding the roof open and obviously risking water damage from rain. So the estimated cost is $35 plus for each strap or clip. It's probably a little low for these days. Need to update that. So here's I call them Brother Mike and Joe. They're retrofitting my house, and I'll touch on a few things here. They're going through the soffits. And what's happened is they loosen a soffit, they pull them apart, and then they slide it out of the way and they go to the next one. So I just bought this house and I knew these straps were not right, and they were going through them and fix them. So that's kind of what that looked like. Now, interesting enough, we use the twist straps, and something comes up here immediately. Well, they're bolted to the house or Tapcon to the house, turbo screwed to the house, whatever you want to call it. But they're over the cementous coating. And if this was a frame house, that would be an absolute no-no. And it's also no-no to bend those back over since they're bent back. So even though if I pull the roof off, I really can't bend those back over the truss and get wrap credit. But we were just trying to do the best we can, and we were trying to get those screws away from the edge of the top. So again, different ways of doing it, but we got our 4 nails there, and this is kind of what it looks like. This picture came from Manny Gonzalez, and this is a stucco house. You can see by the stucco bulging in the top, and they wrapped it. But what are those concrete screws attached to if this is a frame house? First of all, you can't use concrete screws really into wood. It's not what they're designed for. And how do we know we hit the wall stud? We don't. So this is why this is no good. You would actually have to cut out the stucco to connect it. So there's other options that are much better than doing it this way, and this would be no credit for me. So sometimes I use the plans. You can show the connectors and you show the schedule, and this is just one picture. There's a couple on this one, but we couldn't get in there. There was no way. So what we did was we used the plans, and of course, those today are now inspected pretty thoroughly by the building department. So I would say you're probably pretty good, and we wanted to see the connector schedule on the plans. Again, some other possibilities. One thing everybody forgets is sometimes you get a masonry wall with wood top plate, and that's usually has a J bolted it down. There's some arguments on how much that needs to be attached as well. But these are some connectors you could use, and this is actually a masonry house, but it's using wood to wood connectors.